So welcome everyone to our day 5 Gita Gyan. So we will get started. This is dedicated to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinash Narasimha iti Namini. Mukam Karoti Vachalam, Pangum Langayatim Girim, Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande, Sri Guru Dinatarinam, Paramananda Madhavam, Sri Chaitanya Vishwaram, Om Tat Sat. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's it. So we'll begin with Gita Mahatmya. So this is verse 5. Bharatamrita sarvashvam Vishnu Bhaktrat Vinishritam Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanmana Vidyate. By drinking the Ganges water of the Gita, the divine quintessence of the Mahabharata emanating from the holy lotus mouth of Lord Vishnu, one will never take rebirth in the material world again. In other words, by devotionally reciting the Gita, the cycle of birth and death is terminated. So I also sent all of you the Gita recitation slokas in Sanskrit, so you can play it along in your free time, or you can, if you'd like to learn the Sanskrit, you can also try to hear and you can say the pronunciation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we will recap chapter 4. So chapter 4 was called Jnana Yoga, or the yoga of knowledge, transcendental knowledge. So we began with, here I've put some subsections so that we can understand the chapter's breakdown. So the beginning part was establishing the importance of parampara. So we understood that, right? So how spiritual knowledge has to come through the parampara in order for it to have the mantras, for it to be effective. At the same time, so that the understanding or the philosophy is kept intact, so there is no deviation. Because a lot of people are waiting just to hijack these kind of things, to deviate it and to make it speak the way they want to, to support whatever agenda they may have. So nowadays religion is being used for politics, it's being used for economics, it's being used for so many other nefarious purposes. So that's the importance of parampara. So in parampara, the saintly people, so this knowledge is entrusted to the saintly people, not just to any people. Those people who have controlled their senses, those people who lead a very simple life, those people who have dedicated their lives to spiritual realization. So these people will not be swayed, and carefully this knowledge is brought down. So then we also talked about right after that, Krishna begins to reveal himself as Swayam Bhagavan to Arjuna. So if you understand, this topic is called transcendental knowledge, right? So the point of all knowledge is to understand who is God, who am I, and what's my relationship with God, and how to go back to him. So that is basically the crux of transcendental knowledge. So it begins by understanding the goal. The goal is none other than the Supreme Lord himself, to understand what's his nature, who is he. So therefore he begins to reveal himself from verses 4.5 all the way to 4.15. We heard in 4.6 how he is Bhutanam Ishvara. That means the Lord of all living entities. So, and then we also heard how he is Avyayam. That means he's eternal, never destroyed. He lives eternally. And then we also heard how the Supreme Lord descends into this material world in the form of his avatars. And then what was his mission, right? So there were two famous verses here, 4.7 and 4.8. And then the very important verse, the Gita Phalan, came about in 4.4 to 4.7, one of them. You know, the Janma Karma Chami Divyam. So that was, Krishna is revealed as the goal of knowledge. The purpose of all knowledge is to understand him. And then later, these other things we didn't really cover. So there are, this Gita chapter 4 has 42 verses. So it's not possible to cover all of them, but we can check the sections based on the sections. The other things we will cover in level 2. So we heard about, we didn't hear, but it goes on to talk about surrender and reward. So Krishna will tell Arjuna, as people surrender unto me, I will reveal myself to them in equal proportion. So as we surrender, we will, Krishna will also take we take one step towards the Lord, Krishna takes 2 steps towards us. So appropriate to our surrender. So that was also a verse. We didn't cover that, but I'm just mentioning it quickly so that we can understand how the chapter flows. And then he continues by saying that all bona fide paths leading to him are actually set by Krishna himself. It's not possible for people to invent religion. So it has to come directly from the Supreme Lord. So also in regards to that, we heard about the parampara, right? How there are 4 bona fide paramparas in the Kali Yuga. And Krishna concludes this section by stating that he is the ultimate provider. That means all the yagyas are ultimately for his satisfaction. And then he also mentions how he created Varnashram. The purpose of yagyas is for us to satisfy our desires. By performing these yagyas, we will get the necessities of life in abundance. So, and that's the purpose of that. At the same time, we also make spiritual advancement. So these are pious activities, right? Then there is Varnashram, how the social structure was created just to facilitate the entire society to going back to Godhead. That means they don't, so that by following this structure, it's well formed so that there is no, how to say, there is no disturbances. Everything flows smoothly. So everybody can focus their energy to understanding spiritual knowledge. So that was Varnashram to satisfy, and all this is discussed. Then Krishna goes on to talk about what is karma, vikarma, akarma, what is action, what is bad action, forbidden action, good action, what is considered no action. So this section we did not cover, but we will cover it in chapter 5 a little. We will revise back to this section, and in detail, karma, we will talk about it in level 2, how karma works and all that. So because just to talk about karma will take one entire hour. In fact, in level 2, I did it with 2 classes. So this one, we will leave it for a moment, but we will revise this. We will understand basically what is this. The spirit is captured in this level 1. So that's why we call it essence of Bhagavad Gita. So then Krishna went on to talk about how knowledge or transcendental knowledge, how someone who is situated in transcendental knowledge, and what are the symptoms. So this part we did cover. So it began with the need for a guru, right? We understood that point. Tadvidi pranipratena pariprasnena sevaya Upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinaha. The guru has to be someone who has seen the truth. Jnaninas tattva darshinaha. So, and then how he will, this by the knowledge that flows through the guru, we can become, with this knowledge of transcendental knowledge, we can become impervious to illusion or maya, right, or moha. So we can understand, we can learn to see what is real and what is not through the eyes of scripture, not to see through our own eyes, but through the eyes of knowledge. Like, for example, we see Ganga as dirty, right? But then through the eyes of scripture, we know that Ganga is always pure. So it may be dirty in material estimation, but in spiritual estimation, it is very, very pure. So therefore, in that kind of realization, we will be acting. So that is the power of jnana, and jnana has the power to actually save us from miseries. Because we have the illusion removed, we will be able to make the right decisions. Okay? So the symptom of this is we will be able to see Bhutani as part of Krishna. That means all living entities we will see as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So that is the vision of someone who is a Tattva Darshinaha. That means who has seen the truth. He is able to see every living entity as part and parcel of the Lord. And we discussed about how this knowledge, transcendental knowledge, acts like a boat to save us from this tossing waters of material misery, right? That we discussed how the three modes of nature act on us, and in this way we are tossed left and right and all in the waters of material misery. And it also saves us from the three kleshas: Adi Bhautika, Adi Atmika, and Adi Daivika. And this particular verse we didn't cover, but Krishna goes on to say that this knowledge of transcendental, to actually understand who is God, who am I, what's my nature, what's my relationship with God, how do I go back to Him, attaining the supreme abode. This is actually the ultimate fruit of all kinds of spiritual activities, because that is the one that's actually going to save us. So therefore he says this is the mature fruit of mysticism. Any kind of mistake or spiritual activity, it should result in that. Ultimately, the goal is towards that direction. So then the next section, Jnana Phalan, the fruit of this knowledge and the means of this attainment, this is in detail about how we do this. So that part we didn't cover. We will talk about it in level 2. Basically, it talks about how through this knowledge we can attain supreme spiritual peace, and then how this knowledge, this kind of Jnana Yoga is not for those who are faithless, people who don't have faith in the scriptures, right? And then he also says how Jnana helps to strengthen our faith, and it destroys our doubts and keeps us determined in this yoga pathway. So this is basically the chapter 4. Okay, so along the chapter 4, we introduced to you quite a number of things which probably it might have been difficult to understand. So that's why we mentioned earlier in the chapter 1 itself, Arjuna himself set the scene, right? He asked when Krishna told him that I spoke this to Vivaswan, Arjuna couldn't understand it. So then he put it very nicely. He had faith, so he basically he wanted to try to understand. So that spirit is very important. We should accept the scripture based on faith, and then slowly we develop our understanding to reconcile our doubts. So that will take time, right? So Gita is not something which we can read just once. It probably, it takes many readings for us to really understand these points very well. But don't worry about that. In chapter 5, today, we will clear quite a number of things. So basically, the key takeaways were transcendental knowledge means, so what is Jnana Yoga then? Transcendental knowledge means who is God, understanding that. And Krishna establishes that right from the beginning. Who am I? That we have already heard, that we are the soul. But so what? What is the dharma of the soul? Like everything has dharma, right? What is the nature of sugar? The nature of sugar is to be sweet. right? You cannot separate the sweetness from the sugar, otherwise it has no meaning. What's the nature of fire? Fire's nature is to give light and to be hot. So that cannot be separated, right? So like that, everything and every object and every existing creation has a nature, inherent nature. So then one may ask the question, what is the nature of the soul? So that's a very nice answer to that. So this answer we will reveal to you later on in later chapters. So to understand that answer and then to revive again our relationship with God. So this is for our own benefit. So in chapter 5, this comes to Karma Yoga. The title is Karma Yoga again, but this time it's Karma Yoga with a twist. So in chapter 3, we heard Karma Yoga, but again, we talk about Karma Yoga because Arjuna, just like we couldn't really understand quite a number of things yesterday, maybe. So Arjuna also couldn't understand some things. So he had a question. So he begins the chapter 5 with a question. So therefore, Krishna revisits this and he clarifies in detail. But basically, it's actually also, it's not really a revisiting. It is actually a progression. Because from action, we get knowledge. By performing action without attachment, in this way, slowly we develop higher knowledge. And from higher knowledge, then comes what is called karma sannyasa yoga. So that means renouncing all activities. What is really renouncing all activities? So if chapter 3 is action, activities, chapter 4 is knowledge, chapter 5 is basically renouncing all activities, karma sannyasa yoga. So we have to understand carefully what is actually renouncing all activities. Does it mean going away from work? So that we have to understand here in this chapter. So it begins with chapter verse 1. Arjuna says, "Oh Krishna, right? First of all, you asked me to renounce work." Where did he ask Krishna? Where did he ask to renounce work? Right? If you remember, he was telling Arjuna in chapter 3, do your work, right? But do not have attachment to it. So renounce it. So in that way, renounce work. So Arjuna understood, okay, I will do my work for duty's sake, okay? Then after that, Krishna also does say other things. After saying do it for duty, don't be attached to it, then Krishna also tells Arjuna, but you do it for me. So therefore, then in the next part, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. So first you say renounce work, and then you say work with devotion. So this is the verse. Arjuna uvacha sanyasam karmanam Krishna punaryogam cha samshasi yachreya etayor ekam tanme bruhi sunischitam. And Krishna gives an answer to that. But before that, Arjuna wants to definitely understand what's the difference. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial, right? So if you remember, I've mentioned yesterday and also the day before, there are two paths to yoga. So there is two parts to yoga. We've mentioned that in chapter 2 also, right? Chapter 3 also we mentioned. But again, now he wants to really clarify which is the better one. So just to understand a little bit in context, right? So Arjuna puts the question, which is better, right? Sannyasa or going through the path of jnana. That means, remember there are two parts. One is the path of jnana and one is the path of bhakti. So therefore, from chapter 2, if you remember, Krishna told Arjuna, Arjuna was very upset. He didn't want to fight. He was disturbed. And then Krishna tells Arjuna about the soul. And then he counters all his arguments one by one. Then he says, do your duty. And then you do your duty correctly, you will enjoy benefits. So he briefly spoke about what we call karma kanda. That means fruitive activities, doing activities for their results. But towards the end of chapter 2, he started telling Arjuna, go beyond this. So work for duty sake alone. So if you do this, this is yoga. So while he was talking about working for duty's sake, towards the end, suddenly he drops the hint saying that, but you dedicate it for me. So it looks like as if he's saying two things, right? So, and okay, let's leave that for the moment. But then he goes on to say, what's the purpose of doing yoga? While doing yoga, the purpose is to get divine consciousness, to achieve that level of consciousness, which is called divine consciousness. And then he gives examples about what is the divine consciousness all about in chapter 2, the Sthita Prajna. And Arjuna was also hearing, oh, is it like that? And then at the end of chapter 2, he says, he thinks, now, if you recommend me to be a spiritual person, why do you want me to fight? I don't think spiritual people fight. So therefore, he became confused. And he says, if to be a yogi is better, like Arjuna, you're telling me to be a yogi, but why do you want me to fight? I don't think yogis fight. So then Krishna goes on to tell Arjuna, yoga doesn't mean not doing duty. So then Arjuna, is it? Because he always thought yoga means like to, become like a renunciate, to go to the forest, to go and meditate, or, to do nothing, to be completely a social outcast, that kind of thing. So he thought that was the point. So then Krishna says, no, that is the improper understanding. Then he tells, not doing duty is actually sin. So why? Because you are not yet at the level where you can where you are not having any duties upon you. We are still attached. So therefore, to not do duty while we are in this state is considered a sin. And then Krishna tells after that, even the perfected souls, even the divine consciousness people, those who have achieved the divine consciousness, though for them there is no duty, still they do the duty, just to set an example. Example are Maharaj Ambarish, Janaka Maharaj. So they were all perfected souls, but still they set the example just to follow, so everybody doesn't get deviated. So then why, you may ask, why is this so important? Why do they set example? So this is so that society doesn't get deviated. Is to protect society from what is called Falgu Vairagya. So Falgu Vairagya means renunciation, to let go everything, to be detached from everything. And Falgu means false. So false renunciation. So you may be wondering why I'm putting this picture. This is a picture of a river in India, in the state of Bihar. And this river's name is Falgu. Why it's called Falgu or false river? Because this river, it looks like as if it's land. A big part of the river, actually throughout the stretch of this river, it looks like as if it's land. And the river water looks very narrow. So you can see here, this looks like land, but actually it's not, it is river. If you step on it, you will sink. So therefore it tricks people. Falgu Vairagya. So then the acharyas also give examples. For example, we don't want to be like this. We don't want to cause havoc in society. We don't want to give ill reputation to spiritualists, because they are in Kali Yuga, this kind of people will be a lot. There will be a lot of so-called renunciates, but they will be very attached actually. They just do this for a show to get profit out of it. So this acharyas describe this kind of people are like the crane. Now the crane is, you can see the crane standing in the water. Now the crane will not move. It will stand still like this for hours. And then, people, just like how Babaji or someone will just sit still for hours without doing anything. The same way, the crane is also standing still for hours. And not only that, it's standing on one leg. It will raise one of its legs up, and only it will stand on one leg. So people might think, wow, this bird is so austere. It's doing great austerity, standing on one leg, standing still. It looks like as if it's meditating. But what is the thing that's running in the crane's mind? The crane is certainly not thinking of here, this is a flamingo. Same flamingo, crane, stork, they all do this kind of behavior. So what is running in the crane's mind? It's not thinking about liberation from the cycle of birth and death. It's not doing all these things. It is simply standing there, meditating, thinking, where is the fish? Now it's standing in one leg because it wants to trick the fish to think that this is a branch. If it stands on two legs, the fish will know also. Quite intelligent, the fish. So therefore it stands on one leg, hoping to trick the fish. So as soon as the fish swims a little nearer, it will extend its neck like a spear and gobble up that fish or catch the fish. So its purpose is only profit. Its purpose is not true liberation. So therefore, the sages warn us against this kind of behavior. So to falsely renounce, this is not the way to do it. Another example also, they talk about Falgu Vairagya is also called Markata Vairagya. Markata Vairagya. Markata means monkey renunciation. So the monkey is also very renounced. If you look at the monkey, you can see the pictures here. They all look like saintly people, isn't it? Very renounced, and at least, like the Naga Babas or in India, sometimes you will see, when they come for Kumbh Mela, you will see how they look. Very renounced, full, like they're covered with ash. They are not wearing any clothes. So the monkey also looks like naked. He's not wearing anything. He just sits there. But actually, the monkey keeps many female monkeys around it. So one male monkey will actually mate with many female monkeys. Though they look very renounced, they also vegetarian, they eat fruits and everything. But this is called Markata Vairagya or Falgu Vairagya. So anyway, so coming back to Gita. So that's the purpose behind this. And then in chapter 4, Krishna goes on to talk about how ultimately this path of karma yoga, which he talked about in chapter 3, the act of the doing duty but without any attachment, by doing this, ultimately one culminates in knowledge, in getting higher knowledge, because he's actually performing sacrifice. So by performing sacrifices, he gets purified, his consciousness becomes purified. His consciousness becomes purified, and then it culminates, the next level is it culminates in transcendental knowledge. So he starts realizing the transcendental knowledge. He really understands situations like how I am actually the Atma and how everybody else is. He starts to see the divinity in everybody. So therefore, in this stage, once they achieve jnana stage, the stage of jnana yoga, right? Then only the person actually has no more duties at that point, right? He says here in Bhagavad Gita 3:18. One in knowledge has no more duties, not one who is, and this is realized knowledge, not just theoretical knowledge. That is actually, so now to quickly understand this nicely, so I prepared this schematic diagram. So basically in chapter 3.3, Krishna tells Arjuna, "O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained there are two classes of men who try to realize the self." So in yoga, there are two paths, as I mentioned. So while there are these two paths, they share commonality. What is common? Both also will have action, karma, right? Both also will have action. So it begins with karma, right? Now, on one side of the path, this is the jnana path, or the path of, also called the path of inaction. Later on, we will understand, right? So in the karma, in the jnana path, basically it begins with Krishna tells, if you want to follow this jnana path, don't just falsely renounce. First, perform karma yoga. This is the basic. So therefore, Krishna says, therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. Okay? So that in that way, one develops higher consciousness. So that's the jnana path. But at the same time, Krishna has been also talking about the other path, the bhakti path. When he'll always say one part, but then he'll always at the end, he will say, but surrender to me. But, give it to me, like that. But think of me. So when he talks about karma, he'll say, do your work for me. When he talks about knowledge, he says, ultimately, you must understand, I am the conclusion of knowledge. So like that, he goes on to ultimately point towards himself. So he's also at the same time, at each chapter, he's outlining what is called the bhakti path, the other path. And this bhakti path is called the path of action. So from karma also, or karma, what kind of action will we do? So we can perform action. You can see the difference here. Karma with jnana path and karma with bhakti path. Karma and jnana is as a matter of duty, whereas karma with bhakti, see this definition later on in 330, he talks about bhakti in karma yoga. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires of profit, just like the same over here, with no claims to proprietorship and free from lethargy, fight. So Krishna is talking here about bhakti, actually, but in context with karma. So that's the reason Arjuna, he's thinking, now, are you trying to tell me which path should I follow? It seems that you're outlining two paths for me. So anyway, from karma, either we follow the jnana path or we follow the bhakti path. Okay, let's say we follow the jnana path. If we follow the jnana path, right, though it's called jnana yoga, the jnana path is for a set of yoga, right? So transcendental knowledge, right? It's called, once we achieve this karma yoga, someone who's able to perfect this karma yoga, he will start in jnana path. He will start by practicing strictly how to only do activities for the sake of duty. By doing this, he will get realization and he will come to the jnana. He will get higher realization of knowledge and he comes to the next level, which is called jnana yoga. So at this stage, then he no longer has duties. Even if he lets go his duty, because he already has higher knowledge, higher understanding, higher realizations. So at this point, if he lets go his duty, he does not get any sin. But this means higher level already. So it's not everybody who's able to do this. So that's why Krishna is telling, don't let go, do your work first. Okay. And after Jnana Yoga, there is one more step. Once knowledge is fully realized, then it will lead to a higher level, another yoga, which we will cover in chapter 6. Now, this is what is part of the jnana path, or the part of inaction. Why it's called part of inaction? Because from jnana, once they achieve jnana, they will go and seclude themselves. They will no longer be doing their duties, and they will go to the forest to do other things, like meditation, to do nothing, basically, to meditate and things like that. So that's why it's called the path of inaction. Now, this was done in previous ages, in Satya Yuga and all that. So then Krishna continues, 5.2. The personality of Godhead replied, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Sanyasa Karma Yogascha, Nishresya Sakara Ubau, Tayostu Karma Sanyasa Karma Yogo Vishishyati. So you can see here, Sanyas Karma. This is the title of this chapter 5. So he's saying the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. So he's telling there's nothing wrong with what I'm telling you, Arjuna. Both paths which I have highlighted to you, both also can be used for attaining liberation. Right? Then he goes on to say, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. So here Krishna clearly tells his preference for what Arjuna should do. Right? And then as we go on to chapter 5, to verse 6, Sanyasastu mahabaho dukam aptum ayogataha yoga yukto munir brahma na chirenadi gacchati. Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. So Krishna is telling one path is a difficult path. It's not going to be an easy path for you. The path of jnana is fraught with difficulties. And he will mention this again later also in chapter 12. So because Arjuna will again reconfirm which path is better. So Arjuna will again reconfirm it clearer and clearer. He's slowly opening up the topics. Okay. Then he says, but a thoughtful person, that means a determined and serious person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme quickly without delay. So therefore he's recommending to Arjuna, take the other path. Though it's the easy path, you can achieve the supreme the same as the other. So in conclusion here, answer is both are good, but work in yoga or devotion is better. And this is basically 5.2 all the way to 5.6. Krishna convinces Arjuna of this. So then we move on to 5.10. Brahmani adaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate dasa papena padmapatram ivam basha. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord. So here he's talking about karma and bhakti. This is bhakti basically, because surrendering the actions to the Supreme Lord, but it is relating to karma yoga. Is unaffected by sinful action. So if we follow either way, one becomes, so especially if we are simply doing karma yoga without duty, we also are free from sinful action. Krishna is telling, if you try to start from bhakti and you try to work for the Lord, that also you are protected from sinful action. Just like the lotus is untouched by water. So now here sin is mentioned. Now sin was mentioned a few times before, and I also mentioned in the beginning of this session today in chapter 4, we skipped the part in chapter 4 where it talked about what is sin, what is piety, and what is inaction. So therefore, we will quickly just revise back to chapter 4 just to give us an understanding about what this is all about. What sin, what is karma, vikarma, and akarma. So this is going back to chapter 4. Karmano hi api bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha akarmanas cha bodhavyam gahana karmano gatihi. So we are introduced to three terms here: karma, vikarma, and akarma. So karma means action, which here, especially karma here, comes to the context is pious actions or activities which are prescribed or duties. So this is karma, right? And vikarma means forbidden action. V means wrong karma. That means you shouldn't do this. Vikarma. So, and then we have one more, third one, which is akarma. That means no action. So even though we are performing action, but the result is as if we are performing no action. So there is karma. So what's the point? What does karma give? Karma will give piety. If we perform prescribed duties, that means we are trying to perform pious activities according to scriptural injunction, we will get what is called punya. So this I've already mentioned in chapter 2. Punya means good credits. But if we do wrong things, if we do forbidden things, right, things which are contrary to the scriptures, then that is vikarma. So the result of that is we get papam or sin. So there is piety and punya or sin. Both are there. So piety is one thing, sin is one. So what will happen if we do pious things? We will get good reactions. The reactions of this piety will give us good things. One good deed deserves another, like that. And the reactions of sinful activities will give us sinful activities. But there is a third thing, akarma. And this is the one that spiritualists are trying to attain. This can only be attained by yoga. So yoga activities fall into this category of akarma, and akarma is very powerful. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So here Krishna is telling the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. So this is the law of karma. So we will talk about the law of karma in detail in level 2, because there are different types of karma acting. So we won't talk about that now. So But nevertheless, Krishna says, therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. So why? Because this is what keeps us taking birth. You remember in chapter 2, we talked about how we take multiple births again and again and again. So why does this happen? It happens due to two reasons. Why we remain in this material world, why we are here in this material world, and why we have got this body, why we have got this type of situation, and why different people are having different situations and the different types of mentality and all that, their nature and all these things. It's because of these things. So it's due to two factors. It's due to desire and due to karma. So we have desires, full of desires, and our desires propel us to action. So it begins with karma. Karma here, you can see karma means lust or desire, right? And this propels us to action or karma, and this in turn rewards us with reactions. So whether it's sinful or pious, it depends. It gives us the reaction, and these reactions will act upon us, whether in this life or in the next life, and it will also influence the type of desires that we are having. So therefore, it becomes like an endless loop, a loop. So that's the reason we want to break this loop. So what's the key to this? The key to this is we have many desires. It's not easy to become desireless. We cannot become desireless. Very difficult. It's possible, but it's very, very difficult. So therefore, we need to begin yoga, which works to purify our desires. To understand what is purification of desires, that we will talk about in later chapters. And once we perform yoga, karma, our activities, will not create reactions. So the cycle is being cut at every level. See, the karma part is being purified. The karma will not give reaction because it's in yoga. And when there's no more reaction, it will no longer influence our lust and desire in the future. And in this way, the cycle gets broken. So that's the way of yoga. So Krishna in chapter 3.16 says, my dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice. So here we try to understand what is karma, right? Broadly, right? Not in detail, but broadly. Karma here means one who does not follow scriptural injunctions, or basically one who doesn't follow the cycle of sacrifices, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. And then he goes on to say, living only for the satisfaction of the senses. What are our senses? You know, our tongue, satisfaction of the tongue, satisfaction of the eye, satisfaction of the ears, the nose, the skin, satisfaction of the genitals, and these kind of things. So living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. Why? Because the human life is wasted. It's not the purpose of the human life to satisfy the senses. Because even as animals, they can satisfy their senses 10 times to 100 times even more compared to a human birth. So we've mentioned all this previously also, but we will repeat here and there as we go about. So in other words, in human form of life, we have got developed intelligence. So why is this human life special? Because we have developed intelligence. And what is this intelligence for? It's not for us to become more sophisticated in our eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. It is for us to discriminate between right and wrong, because an animal cannot do that. An animal is only guided by its senses. If you want to train an animal to do what is right or what is wrong, it is simply doing it because it knows if it does something right, it will get rewarded with food. If it does something otherwise, it will get beaten or it will not get food. So that's its motivation. That's it. It doesn't know anything higher. So only in human life we have this. So that's why it's very special, right? We have this developed intelligence to discriminate between right and wrong. So therefore, it's our response and lead responsible lives. So therefore, human life means responsible life. In other words, human life means a life of sacrifice. That is what human life is all about. It's not about enjoying our senses, right? So therefore, and that sacrifice is for us to understand what is right, what is wrong, by understanding the scriptures, to actually inquire deeper. So we cannot give an excuse. We cannot say, oh, I didn't know. Just like how the fire will burn the child, even the child, if it's 1-year-old child, if he puts his finger in the fire, the child cannot say, oh, I didn't know how you can burn me. So in the same way, ignorance is not an excuse. Why? Because we have intelligence. Human life is meant for this. Human life is meant for us to understand what God wants us to do in this life. It's not meant for us to become engineer, doctor, accountant, or businessman, or millionaire, or whatever, anything else. That's not the purpose of life, right? Or to have a lot of family, to have huge battalions of family and everything like that. But that's not the point. So this is the real point. So if we engage in sinful activities, so basically broadly, these sinful activities are broadly rooted in the 4 pillars of adharma, or irreligious activities, which are, what are the 4 pillars of irreligion? Basically, meat eating. Why meat eating is a sinful activity? Because it is himsa. It causes pain and suffering to other living entities. So it destroys the pillar of compassion, or daya. So that's the reason. And it's not just meat eating, it's basically anything which we do which is himsa, like, using harsh words to hurt people, to cruelty. Cruelty can be in terms of words, can be in terms of deeds, action. So we have to avoid these things. Gambling is another pillar of adharma, right? Because it destroys the pillar of uh, truthfulness. One who gambles will not keep truthfulness. And then there is intoxication, basically addiction, any type of addiction to liquor, addiction to cigarettes, addiction to even any kind of, some people are addicted to coffee and tea. So one should not be a slave to substance. So because why? That destroys austerity. How to perform austerity when one is addicted to substance? So therefore, these are rooted in adharma. And the last pillar is illicit relationship, illicit sexual activity outside of marriage. So this is all the root, because that destroys, it said that this destroys cleanliness. So one may wonder why cleanliness. Is cleanliness has cleanliness of the body, cleanliness of speech, and cleanliness of the mind. So one who is in this kind of activity, his mind will be polluted, his speech will be polluted, and his actions, body also will be polluted, not fit for spiritual activity. So if we do these things, these are broad, there are many, many aspects of sin. So then we will suffer karmic reactions. If one is extremely sinful, then there is hellish planets waiting for us in our next life. So that is very, very sinful reaction. So these kind of descriptions are given in the Garuda Purana about the hellish life. And it's also described in Srimad Bhagavatam. The different descriptions. It seems there are thousands of different types of hells. Each hell has a different type of category. So, and it's quite scary. And you would be surprised to think the amount of type of hells they have. It's very, very imaginative. And this even led to modern people like Dante, Dante Alighieri, I think Italian painter who painted the scenes of hell in his famous painting. So all this he got from the scriptures, Vedic scriptures. And if we don't go to hell, not everybody goes to hell. So then sinful activities, the reactions would be degrading to lower life forms. So if therefore, we will become animals or things like that in our next life. So more of this we can hear in chapter 15. We won't discuss that now, and much more detail we will talk about in level 2. Or we will suffer if we don't degrade into animal life. We will suffer as humans. We will suffer the threefold miseries. What are the threefold miseries? Adi Daivika, Adi Bhautika, and Adi Atmika. If you remember, miseries caused by natural disasters, like our karma, due to natural disasters, due to war, right? All these birth defects and all that, that is basically Adi Daivika. Also Adi Bhautika, miseries caused by other living entities, and Adi Atmika. Even if everything else is fine, our own mind can be the biggest devil. It can destroy that. The idle mind is the devil's workshop, they say, isn't it? And Krishna also later on says how the mind is the worst enemy. It can be the best friend and it can also be the worst enemy. So these are the reasons why people are born this way in different situations. Why a child is born deformed, why a child is born with AIDS. The explanation is this law of karma. If we engage in pious activities, however, right, then based on the 4 pillars of Dharma. So what are the 4 pillars of Dharma? Broadly is categorized like this. Dharma is represented by a bull, and therefore it's described as, it stands on 4 legs. These 4 legs are Satyam, Tapa, Daya, Saucham. Mentioned already: truthfulness, cleanliness, discipline, austerity, and compassion. So Arjuna displayed this compassion right in the beginning of chapter 2, right? So therefore he was fit to understand higher knowledge. So if we perform these activities, like in current life, then we will enjoy pious karmic reactions. These are karma. We will get good reactions. So we will get birth in a nice family, in a nice country, and our lives will be smooth. There will be miseries up and down, because in this material world, karma and piety and sin are mixed together. But generally, it's moderated according to which is higher. So not only in this earth, some people perform pious activities, like charity work and things like that to other people. They dedicated their lives. So this kind of charity work, the reaction is very, very wonderful. It's said that one doesn't enjoy in this earth. What to speak of earth? They can enjoy in heaven. They can go to Swargaloka, Indraloka, and they can enjoy there as one of, if they are very, very wonderful piety, they can even become one of the devas, take the position of one of the devas. There are 330 million devatas, right? And that's just in this universe. There are multiple universes, and in multiple universes there will be a vacancy somewhere. So it depends on our piety. We will fit that bill. We can enjoy over there. But it's not a very good point to do, but that's not the all in all, because Bhagavad Gita later on in chapter 9, I'm just putting this quickly here so that we can understand. Bhagavad Gita in chapter 9, Krishna continues to say, when they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the result of their pious activities are exhausted. So it's like an account, right? We have pious account and sinful account, separate. One doesn't cancel each other. The pious account will not cancel the sins. It doesn't work like that. The sin, so you have to suffer the sin and we have to enjoy the piety. So it both comes together. So even if if we are enjoying our piety, the credits will go down. As we are enjoying, our bank account, credit account goes down, down, down. And here it says, after it's all exhausted, what happens? Then Krishna says they return to this mortal planet again. They come back here to this earth, Bhuloka, and take birth here again, so that they can again regenerate their accounts, either piety or punya. So in the end, either way, Krishna says, in 9:21, he continues, thus those who seek sense enjoyment or even any kind of piety by adhering to the principles of the 3 Vedas achieve only in the end repeated birth and death. So it is not transcendental. It doesn't break us. So therefore we understand. And earlier in chapter 2 also, Krishna already gave a hint to Arjuna. He says, one who is engaged in buddhi yukta. Buddhi yukta means intelligent, the intelligent activities or intelligent yoga, right? One who's engaged in yoga rids himself of both good and bad reactions even in this life. So this piety and sin is like a chain, right? It's tying us. So one who performs akarma, right, then he is able to break free. Therefore, strive for yoga, Krishna mentions in 250. So now coming back to chapter 5 here again, 5:12, this translation comes, the steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace. No more suffering, no more fearing that I will fall down. Unadulterated peace. That means he achieves here what is called Brahman. Later we will talk about that in detail. Because he offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, that means not in yoga, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. So I was giving some background to this particular verse here. So Krishna is telling again to Arjuna, be connected in yoga, right? And not only yoga, he's telling Arjuna to follow the devotion path, the path of devotion. Direct your activities to me, because this is the easier path. So how do people become entangled? So here it says, one who is greedy for the fruits of his labor becomes entangled. Just like we have many examples of entanglement, even in the animal kingdom. We can see how the moth is very attracted. The moth, because of its eyes, because of its eyes, is attracted to the flame of the fire, and it will go towards the fire and it will burn and it will die. So due to its eyes, it has died. So the senses, basically Krishna is trying to say, don't try to satisfy your senses. And then we have the example of the elephant. The elephant, it is said that it is very attached to touch. The sense of touch in an elephant is very, very strong, according to scripture. So it wants to rub itself against the female elephant. So the sense of touch, that's basically sexual attraction. So how they catch the male elephant? They will have a female elephant which is trained, and then they will dig a hole, and then they'll cover the hole with things, and then they will train the female elephant to go and walk and try to lure the male elephant. The male elephant is wild. It's in the forest. Once it sees the male elephant, the female elephant is trained to go back. It will turn back and it will walk towards the hole, and somehow it will be free from its hole. It won't fall into the hole, but then the male elephant, madly trying to rub the skin of the female elephant, it will come and then it will fall into this hole and it will get trapped. So just by the sense of touch, it gets bewildered. It gets it means destruction, or it means bondage in this case. The other example is the deer. Now the musk, there's a type of deer called the musk deer in the Himalayas. The famous perfumery and all that. They try to, when you see musk in perfume, it basically comes from the deer's anus. The musk is actually a scent which is released from the anus of the musk deer. So they actually go to the musk deer, they catch the musk deer from the anus, they scrape off this glands, and from there they collect this musk and they use it for perfumes. So this is what it is. So anyway, the musk deer, to catch the musk deer, now the weakness of this deer is it's very attached to, it becomes paralyzed by a certain type of sound. So the hunters those days, they will keep a special horn, a type of horn, and they will chase this deer. The deer will run. Now the deer cannot be caught. It's very fast. It knows how to run. So what the hunter will do, he will blow on this horn a particular note. And then this deer will become almost like paralyzed. It will stop. It will just suddenly stop. And as long as you're blowing, it will stop. It will not move. And in this way, the hunter will take advantage and shoot the deer. So just by the ears, by the sense of hearing, the deer is destroyed. So we have had, all the different senses. And then there's one more sense, which is the sense of taste. So how the fish is caught by the hook, simply because the fish wants to eat something. In this way, just simply by the tongue, the desire of the tongue, to satisfy the tongue, the fish is killed. And the last example is by smell. Now the bee is attached to scents, right? It likes to go to fragrant flowers. It said that the bee is so maddened by the lotus flower, it will stay on the lotus flower and it will not leave. Other flowers, it will take the nectar and it will leave. But the bee is so attached to the lotus flower, the fragrance of that is its weakness. It will not leave. And you know, the lotus opens in the morning and it closes back at night. So even though it's closing, the petals are closing, the bee is so addicted to the scent of the lotus, it will remain there and the petals will close and the bee suffocates and it dies. So therefore, right, there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yada pada pankaja phalasa vilasha bhaktya. Okay, I won't say the full verse. Basically, the translation here is Krishna is telling, this is not Krishna telling, this Sukadev Goswami is saying, just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages, this is a very important point here, even great sages. So basically, he's talking about those people who have taken the path of jnana on the other side, the other path. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord. So that's why Krishna is telling Arjuna, follow the path of devotion. Uprooting deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. Now remember, we mentioned about the cycle of karma. The root of it was kama or desire. So you can see this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It uproots the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities. So therefore, it cleanses and purifies our desires. So this is what devotional service, bhakti path, in the yoga ladder, in the yoga path, specifically has its advantage. So then Krishna continues in 522. An intelligent person, so therefore he's asking Arjuna to be intelligent. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery. So he's telling Arjuna, don't be attached to the senses. Don't spend your life in simply trying to satisfy your ears, your tongue, your nose, your skin, and all that. So therefore, why he says this? Because they are all sources of misery. They eventually lead to misery, just like how we saw the moth led to misery, the elephant, by following its sense of touch, led to misery, and all the animals led to misery. So it's the same also for human beings. If we are attached to satisfying our tongue, we will perform activities which will eventually lead us to misery. Same thing for all the other senses. So Krishna is telling which are due to contact with the material senses. So he's asking us to be more sense controlled. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end. So it's temporary, right? And so the wise man does not delight in them. So this knowledge is very important. It's easily said, but it's not so easily done. But it is easily done through the path of devotion. So we will hear later on in other chapters why it's easily done, why it's easy to conquer our senses following the path of devotion. Because the other path, we are forcibly using our strong mind. By strengthening our mind, we mechanically try to stop ourselves. You know, we tell ourselves we are not going to eat, we are not going to do certain things, and but it's not easy and it's not happy path. Krishna mentioned earlier also, right? It's not a happy path and it's not easy also. So the devotional path is better. So that's what chapter 5 is all about. He's trying to tell Arjuna to go to the other side. So here is another beautiful verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Just try to work in context with that particular verse. Just try to worship in devotional service. Oh, I've already mentioned this. This verse was already mentioned. It's the same verse which is repeating here. So therefore, it uproots the deep-grown desire for fruitive activities, right? So therefore, with devotional service, it becomes easy. And then we come to this very important verse in chapter 5. Chapter 5, this is particularly verse 5:29. Now, in chapter 4, there was a very important verse. Remember the Phalan, Gita Phalan. That one talks about how the Supreme Lord is the goal of all knowledge, right? So like this, chapter 5 also, there is a very special verse. This is called the peace formula. Bhagavad Gita 5:29. We can try to memorize this. Bhuktaram yajna tapasham sarvaloka maheshwaram suhurdam sarvabhutanam nyatva mam shanti richati. So the translation is very important. So I will take the translation piece by piece so we can understand. A person, so Krishna, after talking about all this, he tells Arjuna, basically in sort of like a conclusion, a person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. So here, Nyatva Mam. Nyatva Mam means one who knows me fully, full consciousness. That means who knows Krishna fully, the devotees, right? And Bhuktaram Yajna Tapasham. Tapa and Yagya. I am the ultimate beneficiary of all Yagya and Tapa, of all sacrifices and austerities. So if one who follows even the path of austerities, if he can understand that Krishna is the ultimate goal of everything, then what happens? Then Krishna is also saying, that's one point. If he can understand that I am the Bhuktaram Yajna Tapasham, and one who knows me, then he says, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. He says, if someone understands that I am the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods or devatas, right? So, Sarva, all. Sarva means all. Loka means planets and different realms of existence. Ishwaram, remember we heard previously, Ishvara. Ishvara means controller. So here, Maheshwara. Maheshwara means great controller. Maha Ishvara, great controller. So I am the greatest controller. I control all the other devatas. So later on also, in fact, it will be mentioned, Krishna is Param Ishwaram, the supreme. Because Maheshwaram, Lord Shiva is also called Maheshwaram. He is also Maheshwara, right? So we are also small controllers. We are mini microcontrollers. And then bigger than us are the devatas, like Indra, Surya, and all the rest of them. So the 330 million demigods. So they are Ishwaras. But higher than them is Maheshwara. So Lord Shiva, or here Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. But later on, we will also hear how Krishna is Param Ishvara. Param means the supreme. So Maha is great and Param is the supreme Ishvara. So the supreme Lord of all planets and all devatas. And then he continues on further. So by the way, this is just now I was showing you pictures. This picture is the picture of when this is a pastime of Govardhan Leela. So this pastime is when Brahma, no, sorry, not Govardhan. This pastime is Brahma Vimohana Leela, which is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. How Brahma became bewildered and he made a mistake. So it's a long story. We won't discuss that today. But after that, he apologized and he came to his senses and he gave so many beautiful prayers, which is listed in the Srimad Bhagavatam in glorification of Krishna. And then here we can also see a picture of Lord Shiva coming to take the darshan of baby Krishna when he was in Gokul Vrindavan. When he was born, all the devas came. And when Lord Shiva came, it seems Mother Yashoda didn't allow him because Lord Shiva, he looked like he dressed like a ascetic. That means, he's carrying a trident and then he's dressed in deer skin and he's fully covered with ashes and he's wearing snakes around his neck. And Mother Yashoda, she was so protective of baby Krishna. It seems she didn't allow Lord Shiva to come. And later, but Lord Shiva persisted and she said, if you allow me to come, I will give a very wonderful blessing. So then Mother Yashoda, she finally allowed and she brought Krishna just so that Krishna can have Lord Shiva can have the darshan of Lord Krishna. After that, Lord Shiva he stayed in that courtyard of that of that house in Nandagram, and later he took the form of a hill. This hill is called, there's two hills. One is Brahmagiri and the other is Nandagram. So Nandagram hill is an expansion of Lord Shiva, just so that he can be close. This is in Vrindavan, in the pastimes of Lord Krishna. So that he can be close to Lord Krishna's pastimes. So like that, this is a very important verse on that. And then he says, beyond that, Krishna also further goes to say, Suhurdam Sarva Bhutanam. This is a very beautiful sentence here. So he says, and I am also the benefactor and the well-wisher of all living entities. So therefore, you can see here this picture. This is the story of Sudama Brahmana. You know how, if you are familiar with it, in level 2, we will describe these stories in more detail. How Sudama, let me see if we have, okay. So Sudama Brahmana they were childhood friends, right? And when they were growing up, Krishna and Sudama, they were both in the same Gurukul, same school. They were learning from their teacher, Garga Muni. So they were very close friends. So later, Krishna he went on to Mathura and Dwaraka and he became king, whereas Sudama continued to become a Brahmana. And while he was a Brahmana, he was very poor. Remember, I mentioned Brahmanas, they keep themselves simple and in this way. But he was married to a wife, and this wife was also very simple with him. But one day, they didn't even have food. They had to go without food for that night because they were fully dependent on the mercy of the Lord. And because the child was crying without food, the wife was saying, you know, could you just go and ask Krishna? You have a wonderful friend. You have Krishna, who's the king of Dwaraka. Just go and ask him a little bit of assistance. But Sudama didn't want to do that. He said, no, I don't want to ask anything from Krishna. I'm perfectly satisfied. But still, because of the urging, then he thought, okay, I will go. But he said, I will go, but I will not ask anything. And then just to see Krishna, his wife prepared for him a present. Now, if you're going to see Krishna, bring a present for him. So therefore, they were very poor. They didn't have anything. So then they prepared what is called chip rice. You know, in Tamil, we call aval, flat rice. Flat rice, you know, we cook it with coconut and sugar. So they had some dry flat rice, and she tied it in a cloth, and she gave it to Sudama. So Sudama was carrying this, and he was walking. It took several weeks for him to reach Dwaraka. And throughout this, the cloth, you know, it got dirty a little, and he tried his best, but still somehow it got dirty, and he was bringing it with him. And finally, he was allowed to see Lord Krishna. He was announced, and Lord Krishna, immediately when he heard Sudama Brahmana has come to see me, he was being fanned by Rukmini and Satyabhama. Satyabhama on his left, Rukmini on his right. The queens of very, very beautiful queens of Dwaraka, in such great opulence the city was, and they were being fanned. Krishna was sitting and was being fanned. Immediately he got up, and he ran towards Sudama Vipra, and he embraced him and welcomed him. And Rukmini and Satyabhama were surprised. I know you are very attached to the Brahmanas, but this is the first time I see you getting up and going to receive him directly. So then Sudama, when he saw Krishna coming, then Krishna was like telling, oh, I know you have brought something from me. You wouldn't have come to see me without bringing. You're my friend, isn't it? I'm sure you brought me a gift. But Sudama became very embarrassed. When he saw how opulent the city of Dwaraka was, how wonderful everything was made of gold, jewels, and he thought of this simple gift that he had with him, which his wife had packed. Out of embarrassment, he took that bag and quickly tried to hide it and kept it under his armpit. He took that bag and kept it under his armpit. And you know, armpit is not a very nice place to keep food. It's sweaty and all that. But Krishna, he said, no, no, give it to me. I know you have something for me. But Sudama said, no, 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 I don't know what to do with it. I didn't have anything. He tried to say, no, I don't have anything. But somehow Krishna forced it out of him. He took that chip rice from Sudama, and he saw that it was covered, but he didn't care. He quickly opened it. He quickly took it out, and he took that sweat-soaked flat rice, and he just put it in his mouth. And when Satyabhama and Rukmini saw this, they couldn't take it. They said, "Hey, Krishna, oh my Lord, Krishna, please think about what you're doing. We can prepare for you much more wonderful preparations." But Sudama said, "No, the love of my devotee, the love of my Sudama devotee, my friend, is so wonderful, and I can taste it in this flat rice." So that was the beauty of this relationship. So although Krishna is Param Bhagavan, Param Ishwaram, and all these things, you can see how he is willing to, and then after that he received Sudama and he personally washed his feet, and in this kind of way, this was the type of reciprocation, very sweet reciprocation. We can read all about it in Srimad Bhagavatam. One day we will discuss this pastime in detail, the conversation that went on between them. So it shows how Krishna is Bhakta Vatsala. Bhakta Vatsala means he's controlled by his devotees. He's controlled by the love of his devotees. So here, this verse here, it just begins to describe Krishna's nature. Suhurdam Sarva Bhutanam, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, especially his pure devotees who have surrendered themselves to the Supreme Lord. So that's the verse 529. So what happens to this person? What happens to someone who knows that Krishna is this Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasham, he's the Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, he's the Suhurdam Sarva Bhutanam? What happens to someone who knows this about Krishna? So Krishna says that person attains peace. Shantim Richati, attains peace from pangs of material miseries. So what do you mean knows? Jnatva. Knows means to live one's life to understand the goal as Krishna being the supreme goal and living one's life in that way. So that is not something which is very difficult to do, which all of us can actually do it. So that is the understanding from this verse. And the conclusion here is, by taking up the process of Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga, one can change one's karma. So it's not that we cannot change one's karma. Usually it's very difficult to change. Normal people will not find it easy. But one who takes the path of yoga can change one's karma, even in this life. And he can destroy all karma in his coming lives. So no more karma. He can be destroyed. So there are two parts to this. One path is harder. One path is blissful, happy, and wonderful. So therefore, Krishna is suggesting, why don't you take this path and attain liberation from reincarnation? So this is the purpose of this chapter. So we are done with this chapter. So now it is, I will just quickly summarize what we have understood so far. So I've already introduced this schematic diagram to you earlier, right? We understood how there were two parts in yoga, right? So one is the karma path. So we understood how someone who follows this karma, this jnana path, someone who follows this jnana path, then from karma, he will come to the level of knowledge, jnana. So for this person, in the level of jnana yoga, for him, there is no duty. So therefore, these people here, they will become renunciates. They will go into the forest. Therefore, it's called also, jnana path is also called the path of inaction. So, but Krishna, he is telling, don't take this difficult path. Come, take the happy path. So what he's saying, from karma, we do bhakti. We serve to the Supreme Lord. And in this way, by performing bhakti, automatically we will get jnana. So because the bhakti process itself invites jnana into us. So there is this detail we will talk about in later chapters, how this happens. In chapter 10, Krishna will talk about how knowledge is revealed to the devotee. So by the bhakti, we don't have to externally perform jnana yoga. We simply have to perform bhakti yoga, and from bhakti, whatever benefits we get from the other path, we will also automatically get from the bhakti path. The jnana will also come, right? So here the proof, Krishna says here, verse 4.9. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities. So this is the goal of knowledge. This is the Gita Phalan. Remember the Gita Phalan, right? He never takes birth again. So this is the goal of all knowledge. This was already stated. And this is understood by the devotee. So by bhakti, he automatically knows the goal of all knowledge. And all the details will also automatically be revealed by the process of bhakti. And then he goes on further in 438, towards the end of the bhakti. Remember I mentioned in each chapter, whether it's karma or jnana or any other yoga, Krishna is always talking about both paths. He's first talking about the path of jnana, and then towards the end, he will talk about the bhakti path. So this is there in every chapter. So here he's saying towards the end, one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service or bhakti enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. So this is the proof that jnana will automatically follow bhakti. So therefore, and we also heard this final verse, Bhaktaram Yajna Tapasham, he attains peace automatically by understanding this point about the Supreme Lord. And then after jnana, there is one more step higher. So this one step higher is, we are going to discuss this in the next chapter, chapter 6. But from bhakti also, we can attain the benefits of that particular yoga. So we will talk about this in the next chapter, chapter 6. So what's the purpose of all this? 430. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice, whether it's the jnana path or the bhakti path, right, become cleansed of sinful reactions. And having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere. So this is the point. And then finally, in verse 5.5, Krishna clearly indicates his preference to Arjuna. He says, one who knows that the position reached by the means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service. So here he's telling, whatever that's in the jnana path which you're going to attain, you can also attain from bhakti path. This is what he's telling. And then he goes on, 5.2, he also says, right, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. So he clearly indicates his preference. Okay, so we are done here. So here I wanted to just quickly tell a story from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is when Krishna and Balaram were children in Vrindavan. So this is Vrindavan, and you know everybody, Krishna and Balaram will go and herd the cows. This is their pastime. From morning they will leave, and then they will bring all the cows with all these friends. They will play wonderful things in the forest of Vrindavan, many games they will play, and they will at the same time take care of the cows, and then they'll have lunch. One day, their lunch, they forgot to bring certain food stuff. The lunch was left behind. In their excitement, in their playing, somehow the lunch either got left behind or it got lost or something. So they were all rather hungry. So when they were hungry, Krishna said, you know, I know that nearby there is a group of brahmanas who are performing yagya, a fire sacrifice, a very important fire sacrifice. And you know, in a fire sacrifice, there will be all kinds of food stuff, because all these food stuffs will be offered in the fire. So then he told Balaram, why don't you go and collect some food stuff from them? Because I don't want to go, because these are brahmanas, and if you are a Kshatriya, I'm a Vaishya, I'm a cowherd, but Balaram, he's from a Kshatriya mother. Rohini is a Kshatriya mother. So therefore you go, and they will, if a Kshatriya asks for some food, the brahmanas will give charity easily. So then Balaram and all his friends, the Gopas, they went to this bunch of brahmanas who were performing yagya. So this was the yagya taking place. So many of them it was an elaborate yagya. So when the boys came, they asked, now you're performing all this yagya, you should know that the goal of all this yagya is asking for this food. Can you give this food? Krishna is waiting in the forest. Now these brahmanas, they were all in the jnana path. So they didn't understand that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when someone asks for charity, especially when they're doing yagya, they know that it's inauspicious not to give charity. But at the same time, the food was meant for the yagya. So they didn't know what to do. If I say no, that means I am sinful. But if I say yes, then the yagya will be spoiled. So they didn't know what to do. So instead of saying either yes or no, they decided to just keep quiet. So they didn't answer. They just kept silent and they completely didn't answer. So then Balaram smiled and the boys were rather irritated. So then they went back to Krishna. Then Krishna told them, don't worry, I know they won't give, but there is you go and ask their wives. Their wives are preparing all these foodstuffs. The wives will give. You go and ask them. So then they went, and to the same Brahmanas wives, as soon as the wives heard Krishna wants food, and they knew that the husbands would be very angry with them if they took all the food stuff they were preparing, and before it went into the yagya, they were to take it. Now these wives were very strict Brahmana wives, but somehow they were devotees. They understood Krishna was the supreme goal of this yagya. He is the Yagneshwara, the goal of all yagya. So why put into the fire when you can directly give it to Krishna who can enjoy? So therefore, they immediately took all the foodstuffs and they brought it to Krishna, and they gave it, please take. And on top of that, they refused to go back also. They said, now we cannot go back. Our husbands will not accept us. Then Krishna will say, don't worry, I will make everything work out. So thank you. If you are staying here, then we cannot enjoy our pastimes. So you can go back to your husbands. I can guarantee you they will accept you back. So in this way, this is the pastime of showing us how the simple ladies, the wives of the Brahmanas, they could understand the higher truth because they were in the devotional path, whereas the husbands who happened to be in the jnana path, they couldn't really understand. And they missed the chance to please the Supreme Lord. Okay, so the takeaway for today is work in yoga or devotion is better than renunciation. And devotional service to Krishna is the perfection of all work. So this is the goal and the message of the Bhagavad Gita for this particular chapter, chapter 5. So we would like to end with this. This is a verse from the Padma Purana. Harir eva samaradhya sarva deve sureshvaraha harinama mahamantrair nasyat papa pishachakam. So this verse is very similar to the Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasham, the peace verse which I mentioned in this chapter 5. It's repeating the same points. Hari Reva Samaradhya, all the grievous sins of one who worships Lord Hari, the Lord of all lords, Sarva Deve Sureshwaraha. Just like in the other verse, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, here it says Sarva Deve Sureshwaraha. So of all the Devatas, he is the Lord of all lords. And then here it specifically says Harinama Mahamantre. So the Mahamantra, which is made up of the names of Hari, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So all the grievous sins of one who worships Lord Hari and chants this holy name, the Mahamantra, are removed. So the sins are removed. And then the purification of the heart takes place. Basically, it's to purify our heart. So this is the path of the bhakti, right? As we have highlighted before. So therefore, we can say this verse, when we chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we should say, first of all, Jayasri. This is to invoke the blessings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, who are none other than Krishna and Balaram, who propagated this chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So by saying Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, then we can chant this Hare Krishna mantra. Usually we chant 108 times. So that makes up one round. If you use beads, So that one, there'll be 108 beats. So we can chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra 108 times with beats. That will be called one round. So like that, if every day we can dedicate our time, it will take about 7 to 10 minutes, 10 minutes just to chant one round of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, then that will be very nice. Okay. So we end here with the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we'd like to request you to do the quiz. Remember, we are group 2, so I will send the link shortly. So if you don't have the Bhagavad Gita, if you want, this is the beats I'm talking about. So we can use these beats to chant Hare Krishna. So you can use this link to get it delivered to you. And finally, we like to ask here, any questions from anyone?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Prabhu, there's something that I would like to just ask you. Just now you mentioned about this chapter is a bit confusing. I don't know why. I'm a bit confused. This chapter, it says about Krishna's sannyasa yoga. I mean, it is
karma sannyasa
yoga.
Karma sannyasa yoga.
Karma sannyasa yoga. I mean, it is regarding the teachings are more towards sannyasam, is it?
So that's the thing. We have to understand what actually is true sannyas. Krishna, sannyas means, sannyasi means one who is renounced. But the word sannyasa means renunciation. So Krishna is telling simply renouncing and going away. That's why we were talking in the beginning about Falgu Vairagya, the false renunciation. That is not the path. We have to come to the level of realized knowledge, jnana, and then when there is no duty, then one can renounce. But Krishna is telling, even then, still perform your duty because you need to set an example. Don't take that path. Krishna is telling, instead, take the bhakti path where true renunciation is performed. What is true renunciation? True renunciation means we renounce the world, but that doesn't mean we avoid the world. That means we renounce the world, but we, for our senses, for our sense gratification. We don't use it for our pleasure, but we use it for Krishna's pleasure. So in other words, it doesn't mean that we don't eat. We eat, but we cook for Krishna's pleasure and we offer it to the Lord, and then we take that as prasadam. So if we make our lives that we only eat only prasadam every day, so that is a very high level of bhakti yoga, which is real renunciation. So that is what Krishna is telling here.
Okay. And then at the same time, thanks, Prabhu. The thing you mentioned was, about this yoga. Yoga and then karma yoga. Yoga has got two, you said karma yoga and jnana yoga, is it? And then from there it will go further up, isn't it?
Yeah.
This karma yoga is, karma yoga is something that you can do it, is it?
Right. So that's the thing. That's the thing. There's karma, jnana, and there's one more later. It's called dhyana yoga. We will talk about it later. So there's karma, jnana, and dhyana. So from karma, we progress to jnana. From jnana, we progress to dhyana. And from dhyana, ultimately, one realizes that bhakti is the highest. So one can either go through this path of renunciation, the jnana path. In the jnana path, we go step by step like this. We go from karma, and then we go from jnana, and then from there we go to dhyana, and then finally we come to bhakti. Or we can take the other path. So Krishna is telling, don't go this step-by-step path. He's trying to tell both ways. Later in chapter 12, I will tell you why Krishna is giving both paths. If one path is easier, why not just give that one path alone? Why give these two paths and create so much of confusion? So there is a reason behind this. So we will discuss this in chapter 12. But the point here is there are two paths. And this karma, jnana, and dhyana, if we go step by step, that is following the jnana path, the first path, the difficult path, the path of inaction. But if we follow the path of bhakti, then we don't have to go stage by stage like this. Simply by performing bhakti, we will automatically do whatever that karma yoga is doing. Simply by performing bhakti, we will automatically develop the understanding of higher knowledge, which is the result of jnana yoga. And simply by performing bhakti, we will also get the higher points from the other next, the dhyana yoga as well. And in this way, the goal is attained in the same. So that's the idea here. So Krishna is telling there are two paths, but follow the bhakti path. So in the bhakti path, for us, practical understanding here is, it means work, but don't work for duty's sake alone. Work instead for Krishna's pleasure. That is the karma yoga level, the basic level. But higher than that is for us to adopt bhakti directly by performing sadhana. For example, chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra daily, that is bhakti. And by learning to offer the food and whatever that we eat, whatever activities that we perform for the pleasure of the Lord, that is also bhakti. And by taking part in festivals, by worshipping the deity, by reading Bhagavad Gita, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, by trying to understand about Krishna's pastime, hearing, chanting, remembering about the pastimes of the Lord, all these are bhakti processes. We will talk about bhakti in detail when we come to chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12. Chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 talks all about bhakti. So we will talk about this in detail. Now we are just setting the stage so that we understand the different yogas. Okay, Mataji?
Okay, that is performing bhakti.
Yes.
How about devotional service? Devotional service is also bhakti, is it?
Devotional service means bhakti, Mataji.
I see. So the chanting, the hearing, and as well as doing services.
Yes, yes, correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Any other questions from anybody else? Thank you so much for being patient for so long. I'm really sorry with the time overshot again. I'm really struggling with the timing. I hope you can. Anyway, I'm grateful for all of you who are still with me. So if there's anything else, there's nothing else.
Please listen to.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, then we will end the discussion today. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srimad Bhagavad Gita.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Srila
Thank you very
Prabhupada.
much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhu.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.